Mental health is a conversation that is often swept under the rug, except when it isn't, which is all the time. Mental health advocates are numerous and noisy, which isn't a bad thing. There are places it doesn't reach, and that is an issue because everybody should know that struggling with mental health doesn't make you weak or less of a man, because it's usually dudes that are pushing that aside, like, I ain't no bitch. But if you're really having problems and you push it away too long, you might end up pushing yourself off a bridge, and that's not a happy ending for anybody except the people who capitalize on your demise for web traffic. At the same time that mental health is a serious issue, it is also very funny to make jokes about. People who suffer from one mental illness or another will often resort to humor as a means of getting through it, and that is very noble. But it is also fun to not suffer from anything and still make jokes about it, because jokes about anything are funny if they're good. A Twitter account by the name of Mental Health Notes, which is a depression and anxiety support community, according to its bio, has over 100,000 followers and recently tweeted a list of things not to joke about. On this list are depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, cancer, panic attacks, autism, OCD, people who have died, disabilities, rape, and suicide. That sure is a lot of things that I've already joked about. People reacted to this negatively, crying foul at the idea that at least people who suffer through any of these things wouldn't be able to make light of them as a coping mechanism, to which the account followed up by clarifying they only meant that they shouldn't be joked about by people who haven't experienced them. Well, I'm still gonna. It's one thing to, get in someone's face who you don't even know or, tweet at them making fun of them. That's just dick behavior regardless of the subject matter. But if I'm just telling jokes to the infinite audience of the ether, where they float around aimlessly in cyberspace only to be heard by those who are in range, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, no matter what the joke is. Sacred cows are so pretentious. If you've ever been like, people should never joke about this thing, tell me what that thing is so I can fucking lambast it for you. It gives me a thrill. The only exception to this I can think of is when it comes to certain political jokes, because lots of people take their politics very seriously. So even when they make jokes about being glad someone on the other side is dead right when they die, or wishing death, or saying horrible things to people they don't like, those situations rarely capture the spirit of comedy. That's just them being unabashedly vitriolic and nasty, and then using the joke as an excuse to be able to get away with saying it. It's all celebratory. They love that terrible things happen to their political rivals, and a punchline is not an effective disguise for borderline demonic attitudes. Mental illness is funny. Objectively. I can actually use the science behind comedy to prove it. Distilled to its purest essence, comedy is pointing out what's wrong with things. You can take any joke ever told and square root it down to this basic principle. Why did the chicken cross the road? Why do we care? Unless something about a chicken crossing a road feels wrong. It's weird, and the feeling of weirdness implies a breach in the normal social simulation. Weird is just a less damning term for wrong, and then in order to combat the wrong, we input our own information to make it right. Why did the chicken cross the road? Maybe to get to the other side. Maybe because there was a sexy-ass hen he was trying to bang on the other side. Maybe because he just escaped a Popeye slaughterhouse. All these inputs we add in order to make sense of something that is seemingly lacking in sense or explanation. Mental illness is what's wrong with a person's brain. That is pure comedy gold. It's an abundance of wrongness and weirdness just waiting for inputs. Take bulimia, for example. Bulimia is an eating disorder where the person eats a shit ton of food in a short time and then immediately purges it by vomiting or taking laxatives. Laxatives. Tell me there's nothing funny about some chick eating an entire steak and then being like, fuck, I need to shit all this out right now! So she binge eats again, except this time it's pooping pills. And then she spends the next hour on the toilet crying as the 1999 Vargas tragedy comes plummeting out of her ass. That's the world's deadliest mudslide, by the way, you uncultured swine. I looked it up for the joke. Bulimia affects women at a rate 9 times more often than men, which sounds about right to me. Usually when dudes eat an entire pizza by themselves, their next activity is to smoke some weed and play FIFA or some shit without a care in the world about what they just put in their body. If a girl eats an entire pizza, her next activity is regurgitating an entire pizza. Body dysmorphia isn't funny? It's turned people into lizards. It's turned people into Barbie and Angelina Jolie. It's turned people into walking chandeliers of metal piercings whose greatest fear is a fucking magnet. Body dysmorphia is your brain telling you that your true inner self, your manifest destiny, your hidden existential triumph, is a disgusting snake monster with scale tattoos and a forked tongue. That is conceptually hilarious. Mental illness is a treasure trove, just like physical illness. You ever seen people in a wheelchair? Their legs don't work. They're supposed to work, but they don't. That's too bad. I could never be crippled. As I've continued my life all these years, I've gotten really attached to walking. Like, you may not realize how nice it is that you can walk until you can't walk, and then you're like, damn, I need some robot legs right now. I actually know what it's like to not be able to walk because I, like many of you, used to be a baby. And when I was a baby, I had to roll everywhere like a tipped over barrel, and that was a lot of weight to put on my upper infant arms, especially getting those rug burns with the friction. I saw this kid on the news who has no arms and no legs, and he gets around by rolling, like a loose potato that fell down a hill, and it made me think, when is the proper time to give up on life? This dude has to bite everything. He has to use his teeth for grip and slobber everywhere. If I want to go over to his house and play video games, I'm bringing my own controllers. Fuck it, if I go to his house, I'm wearing gloves and a hazmat suit, and you're no different, so hold your perceived moral superiority at the door. You think you're gonna go to his house and take turns playing a game, and when he hands you his phlegm-soaked controller, you're just gonna palm that shit barehanded and become one with the stickiness? I don't think so. Mental illness is such a shoddy diagnostic nightmare, too. I went to an independent clinic at the beginning of this year to go get my brain examined, like literally examined, scanned, tested, all that. And first of all, it's weird to me that mainstream doctors will go around diagnosing mental illnesses without ever actually running brain diagnostics. Like, they'll sit you down and test your faculties and ask you questions, and then just line your answers up with the benchmark standards of different psychological afflictions, and then they hand you some maybes and a just-in-case prescription, and you're like, wouldn't it be helpful while you were in the process of evaluating my brain to perhaps look at my brain, like, at all, with, like, medical equipment and shit? And they're just like, nah, we're more fond of guesswork and assumptions. So I went to an independent clinic, one that specializes in actually looking at your brain to see what parts light up and what parts are overactive or inactive or whatever. And so I got a full brain scan and blood work, and I did some litmus tests, and I played some diagnostic games, and by the end of all of that, I still couldn't get more than a maybe on Asperger's or anything else. For all our advancements in technology, medical science is still so primitive. I went there to finally get this question conclusively answered after 25 years, and they were like, sorta? Maybe? Have you tried taking vitamins? Autism is a spectrum. I understand it. So where the hell am I on it? I'm not pointing at pictures of food on a menu and generally ruining other people's peace and quiet at restaurants, but I'm also not making eye contact with anyone unless specifically asked to during sex, and even that's like, whoa bro, too intimate for me. My dick's inside you, but you want to see my soul? I think we're moving too fast. I'm not walking around with my hands in front of my chest, moving my neck in 8 different directions like a drunk T-Rex, but I'm also not answering the phone when it rings until I take several deep breaths and finish writing my will. What is with autistic people and loose necks? You ever notice that? They don't lock in place. It's like they're constantly shifting under the weight of that extra chromosome. But don't discredit their intelligence. People with Down syndrome understand jokes. Like, one time I held up a mirror to one and he looked into it and he laughed. He gets it. You might not, but he does. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and I'll see you guys next time.